Started. If the clerk will call the roll, please.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Council Laurie.
Here.
Council Nguyen. Two present.
Thank you. Each of us did speak with Council Noon, and he'll be arriving shortly, I guess. Some problems with traffic. But we're here tonight to discuss some of the recycling ordinances that have been proposed. There was a motion made last year to look at a visible recyclables ordinance and mandatory recycling. And so the Solid Waste and Recycling Advisory Committee has submitted some recommendations to that end. And we have that from our packets of about a month ago. So I think at this time it would be good maybe to go through some of the language that was written into the potential changes for that ordinance, and then see what we can do to increase recycling. Obviously, recycling rates have a great not only environmental impact, which is why it's here in this committee, but also a financial impact for the city, and so that the more recycling we can do, both in terms of residents and commercial enterprises, the better. I don't know, Councilor Laurie, if you have any questions to start off?
Not right now.
Okay. So maybe we'll just go through the language that's been proposed by the advisory committee, just to see whether or not some additions might be needed. The first, I suppose, suggested change or clarification began with actually the definitions for the ordinance. Under household, it says 4 said units and no more than 6, which is a bit awkward in its state. Maybe a little bit of change required there, but overflow trash follows that. There shall be a limit of 10 extra bags on any given collection day. And I think that that should probably, the wording of it should probably be changed somewhat to reflect. Clearly, it's not meant that, an individual unit would be allowed this extra 10 bags, and that would kind of work against the entire intent behind the ordinance. But if there were language in there that clarified it so that there was a specific number tied to a specific number of units, so maybe 2 extra bags per unit or 1 extra bag per unit, whatever it happens to be, I think that would make sense. Or potentially looking at a more progressivized fee structure there, so that the more bags you have, the higher the cost.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we as you pointed out, there's certainly environmental benefits to increasing the level of recycling in the city and reducing the amount of solid waste that we generate, and clearly there are also financial benefits. So anything we can do to encourage recycling, I think, makes sense. Mike, and I think as part of that, I agree to just have 10 units, 10 bags at a property. It could be 1 unit generating all of it, and I think we need to really push people to reduce that. So a limit based upon the number of units at the property makes sense. The progressive payment concept, again, makes sense. I'm just concerned about how we would implement something like that, since people buy those based upon, they go to the store, they pick up the bags. One thing I might suggest is that we're getting ready to go out to bid on a new contract, and we're looking at the possibility of doing some things differently, including changing the size of the bins that we use, and maybe shrinking to a smaller one to once again push people once more towards more recycling. We've made great progress, but we haven't really gotten close to where we should be. But maybe if you use whatever bin, whether it's the size we have now or one a little bit smaller, we might want to say that anyone that uses one of those purple bags pays a greater, instead of, I think we're selling those now for $1, we should sell them for $2. Something along those lines. I don't know how we would give a change, though, if you put out one bag, it's $1, two bag, it's $3, so on. That would be a tough process to implement, I think. But certainly the Solid Waste Committee may have some thoughts on that as well.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have is, we were talking about units, is what's the breakdown on units for a collection? When do they need their own dumpster, and when do they collect from the city? Is there a set number of units?
That's a very good question, and I don't know the answer on that. I probably should, but I don't know that. Maybe Gunther knows
it's
that.
actually in the ordinance, so it's 4 units unless it's owner occupied, and then
it's 6.
Right.
And then after that, it's a requirement, but I'm not sure that's where we no longer pick up. I'm not sure if that's actually where it kicks in that they have to have a dumpster. They could have bins of their own,
Right.
as opposed to a dumpster, but.
That's correct. Automatically included or automatically eligible are single, duplex, 3-family, and 4-family. We do have additional eligibility for owner-occupied 5 and 6s. So it's conceivable that a 6-unit apartment building where the landlord lives in one of the units would have 6 carts in front. In addition, in one of the previous revisions, we included the residential component of a mixed use. So it could be a hairdresser downstairs with 2 apartments. Only those 2 residential components would be included. It doesn't mean that a landlord with 5 units who's not owner occupied wouldn't have 5 blue ones. Those are city carts.
Just getting away from the owner-occupied for a second in the units, one thing I noticed, and this was just delivering mail over the years, homes that are owned usually recycle. They're pretty full. Once you get to the apartments where there's not that, probably the same feeling you have of ownership in the city, or you own in the city, it goes down. You might not even see the green buckets out there. And has there ever been a program designed to target, say, renters who may not use the bins?
Not specifically, certainly a good idea that we could incorporate in our outreach. When the city council voted to include 5 and 6 unit owner occupied, the assumption was, as you say, the landlord has a stake in it, the landlord lives there, and those 5s and 6s are more likely in owner occupied than unoccupied to participate in recycling. That's why they were included.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was ever a program designed to reach out to people who rent, who may not feel the same need or the same obligation to try to save money and use the recycling bins.
We could certainly do that.
Myself excluded, I'm sure. But I would say that maybe an opportunity there is actually in enforcing the rental ordinance, that in addition to a number of the other materials that would be sort of provided, the information provided to them, fair housing and that sort of thing, that included in that would be a number of items through this recycling ordinance. I suppose, go to a point that the manager had mentioned about reducing the size of the barrels. I noticed in the ordinance it still has just for the seniors, the abatement, which allows them to then have a smaller barrel and reduce their waste. What kind of steps would need to be taken in order to enlarge that sort of disincentive to produce so much trash?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things we could do. One is we could just, as our standard practice, we could provide a smaller barrel that at the standard rate, and then you could provide a lower rate for an even smaller barrel, about the size of the one that we provide to those on the senior discount. And maybe you discount, if you wanted to continue, we could look at continuing some type of discount program for the senior citizens below that, even that. But in order to get that, and I don't have something off the top of my head for how we would charge, what those numbers would look like.
Right.
But there are people out there that don't use the whole barrel, and I'm sure they would be thrilled to be paying a little bit less and having a smaller barrel. And I'm sure that there are people out there that, if they saw the potential for a smaller fee, might be more willing to recycle. Another part of it that we're looking at is moving to, and we're kind of jumping into a lot of different issues here, but another thing we're looking at is moving to the single stream recycling, which becomes much easier for people to do. And that should help drive up those rates as well. And hopefully we'll start to see more people recycling once they don't have to worry about whether, separating their bottles, their cans, and their newspaper and so on. Just put it all in one barrel.
So two issues there. One would be, and actually Councilman Donser and I had spoken with a few people about this in Pawtuckettville, about there being a concern that because the smaller barrel is only open to those seniors, that then becomes potentially a signal to those that might,
Right.
prey upon senior citizens.
Right.
So you see the smaller barrel out there, and then you know that you have a senior citizen that lives there.
Right.
And so that was one of the, public safety concerns.
Mm-hmm.
To the point about single stream recycling, I suppose, caution that it may drive up recycling rates in the sense that you will see more people putting out more waste, but whether or not that is actually recycled is another question. And so, to complete that cycle, you need those products to be sourced into some other kind of product.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily happen with single stream because the quality of the goods that are recycled at the end of it have become so degraded that they can't be actually recycled into another, viable product.
Right.
So while it may look good for some communities to go that route, it doesn't necessarily translate into more goods being recycled.
Mm-hmm.
But Councilor Noon had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to the recycle bin. For renter who does not have a recycle bin and want to get one, where do they go to get one? And is it free?
It is free, and we have them here in the city manager's office. We also have them down in neighborhood services, and I believe we can have them available at the Public Works yard on Middlesex Street as well.
So they can come to the city to
City
pick
Hall.
up at neighborhood work or your office?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Leahy.
Thank
If
you.
excuse me,
Sure,
could I
go
just,
Mr.
the other potential is they can put out their own barrel, and we have stickers. So some people don't like the small recycling bin because it's too small, and that almost acts as a discouragement from recycling. But if people that do a lot of recycling put out a regular sized trash container, we have stickers that you can put on them that say recyclables, and they can just put that out.
So they do have options, their own recycle or their own bin, but they have to get a sticker so that it signifies that recycle bin.
Correct.
So they can pick up the sticker here at the city also?
Again, at the same locations, yes.
Thank you.
And that actually could probably be clarified in the ordinance language so that it is under definition, so that it is clear that a city labeled barrel also is qualified to have for those recyclables. Councilor Leahy?
Thank you. Couple of things. What would be the goal? We're trying to, I don't necessarily agree with going with smaller barrels, because I think that the barrels that we have now, if you want a smaller one, you could request one or get some sort of a reduction or something, but I think it benefits because, no, they're not filled up all the time, but it helps you when you do some projects around your house. As long as you can break it up and get it in there, it helps out. So if we're gonna make more money recycling, I think the biggest places where we're losing money are the schools, the parks, the streets, the big College Stadium, Edwards Fields, things like that. If we could do a single stream pickup from there, I mean, that would be ideal. They do that at Lowell. They started out with the bigger containers. They were filled up, they were too heavy, they went to smaller containers, so it's easier for people to put them out to the street, but, you know, that's where we're losing our money, if there's money to be saved or made or whatever. So I'd like to see what we can do with the single stream. I didn't quite understand what you meant. I mean, I kind of know what you mean, but if, I kind of look at it what the manager said, instead of separating it, people will still put out the same recyclables and just not separate them. But if you think, I didn't understand what your point was. Are they just putting any type of plastic in it that isn't recyclable?
So the point is that the last step in recycling a piece of material isn't when somebody puts it out in their bin. The last step is when it's actually incorporated into a new product.
Right.
In single stream recycling situations, sometimes what you have is a percentage of those products that are, you know, trying to be recycled are actually damaged in the process because you're just all throwing it into one stream. And so that, for example, whether it's, you know, broken bottles or, you know, contaminated paper, that those materials then aren't able to be used as feedstock into new products.
Okay.
So that while you're removing a number of, you know, potentially it's a higher percentage of the material from the waste stream now, at the end run of that cycle, you aren't necessarily recycling more of those products.
Okay. All right, just one quick thing.
Sure.
When you were talking about the bins or the barrels, I kind of find that the bins actually hold as much material as a 32-gallon barrel, because I do the same thing. I transfer them back and forth, and they're just about the same, hold about the same amount of cans and bottles and stuff. But something that comes up often is when your recycling bin is damaged and broken, what do you do with those? Because sometimes they don't want to take them when they're broken. So we got to have a place to get rid of the recycling bins when they break. And what do you do with your trash barrels when those break? Your trash barrels that you're using for your recycling.
So in the recycling ordinance that was submitted, the new language, you would be allowed to replace your recycling bin once a year.
Okay, so you bring the broken one
as long
down.
as you're able to either, one, prove that it has been stolen, or two, to actually physically bring in the damaged recycling bin so that it can be traded in for a new one.
All right. Thank you.
That's correct, Counselor. If residents would bring their damaged bins to DPW where they can get a free replacement and the appropriate stickers, the damaged ones we stack up and store, and every month on our second Saturday per agreement with Northeast Material, those go to recycling processing. So it doesn't have to become a waste material. We do accept the damaged ones as a trade, and they do get recycled. Absolutely. Bring them down to DPW, we'll do that.
Okay.
Council Laurie?
Just to follow up on something the city manager talked about a little earlier, was the two different size barrels. You know, I was sitting there listening, and first I was just passing it off, but the possibilities, I think, are there if you were talking about a two-rate system, one for smaller. A lot of people are doing work out of their homes now, and that's more paper generated, and I think you may see them use that. And I think we do have businesses in the city that are eligible, and I think businesses probably generate a smaller amount of waste, and they do a lot more paper and that type of thing. And I think if given the opportunity of a lower rate where you might buy a purple barrel, you might see a lot more people. And at first I really didn't give it much thought, but I think that might not be a bad idea. when the next bills go out, if someone wants to trade in the bigger barrel for the smaller one. I think there's a real possibility, especially in the business section, to go that route.
If I may, I think that there are a number of different options, and I understand what Council Leahy was saying. But again, I do think that we just have a tiered system. It could be that and this obviously needs more work, and it really doesn't, it ties to the ordinance, but it's more related to the next contract that we're beginning to work on. But if you have a tiered system, so that, you know, the 65-gallon costs $1 amount, a smaller one, a 50-gallon, costs less, and then a 32-gallon costs even less, and then we work off some type of senior discount perhaps on that as well. That way, the family of four that only puts out 50 gallons a week or something like that, there's an incentive there for them to do that. And the people that want the 65, so that they can always put out 65 gallons, they pay more, but maybe there's a sliding scale, not just a 15 gallons more type of thing, but a lot more, because they're using, in order to discourage people from, or encourage people to recycle.
Well, absolutely. I think it's a great idea.
I mean, when you look at and again, I know this is heading down a different path perhaps, but when you look at our peer community, some of our peer communities, and I think we've put some of this up before the council before, and I mean, the city of Worcester is somewhat unique, but they're at a 50% recycling rate. What's ours? 12?
If we include yard waste, curbside, which they do also, we're at 25.
So we're half of what they are. Yeah. And we should, our community like Lowell should be somewhere in the 35% range. So we have a ways to go with our recycling. We've made great strides. We used to be 50,000 tons a year. Now we're at 29,000, but it's still a lot more to go. So if we had some type of system, we could encourage that even more. And that, let's remember, that saves the city money.
Right.
Council Leahy?
That's a good point, but what it makes me think about is we have to lead by example. So if we start recycling at the parks and in the schools and on the streets, that's going to go, and I don't want to generalize this, but that's going to go to the apartment buildings where you don't see a lot of the recycling. So if we push the lead in this and we encourage most of the renters to recycle, that may increase it. I don't know how we compare, if they break it down to Worcester, how many rental apartments they have, do we have, and what
I think their
percent-
curbside population is twice of ours, but the percent in demographics is approximately the same. I don't know what they're doing in their parks, but Councilor, we have 445 parks barrels. I am working with the Commissioner of Public Works to assess whether we have enough or too many, or we should piggyback it with recycling. So that is underway, being considered now, and how to improve recycling at outdoor
Well, that's
locations.
the biggest thing, because when my kids, I'm in the parks now with all the baseball and lacrosse and all that, and that's the thing they're always saying to me. How come there's no recycling? And I know we have I forget what you call it, bring it in, bring it out type of deal, but,
Right.
Absolutely.
let's face it, we're lazy. If we bring it in, we want to leave it there. So.
We need to do much more in the way of the parks and the schools. There's no doubt about that.
And the ordinance that we do have before you does include the schools, which you commented on. And Councilor, we could do what other cities and towns allow. Currently, we do not accept the business portion of mixed use or commercial properties. It's only the residential portions. But we could see that this ordinance has an opt-in where, for the appropriate fee, they would be also able to lease a wheeled cart for recyclables and put that out on the collection day. So we have discussed that, and that would be possible to let them opt in, because as you said, a home business is all paper, and we want that paper.
Yeah.
Council Leahy?
Just coming back on the parks a little bit, Council A was talking about, I know we have talked about this in the spring. I think I had asked about the possibility of recycling bins in the parks. I think the leagues were looking at it as a cost of revenue for bottles and cans. and I don't know where that went. I know that was last spring, I talked to some coaches.
What
And,
we've been able to do through a grant, Mass DEP grant, and from from DPD, community grants, we've actually brought bottles and cans up into Gage Field. So some areas of Centerville, you'll find that the Little League fields have bottles and cans. The league volunteers, the parents, there's a playground group, they collect those and sort out the nickels, so that's their revenue. But the
Right.
bottles and cans that are not part of the bottle bill, they include at the local school for weekly curbside recycling. So one school at a time, we're getting out to the playgrounds.
So we're doing that now. I think two of the big areas that, and it's where it was approached, at least with me, was I think Highland Park or Calvary Park. There's so much activity going there, and if they could get the recycling bins, and the leagues would get the money, so.
I think one of the problems is the material, as Gunther had mentioned, that isn't covered by the bottle bill. The fact that, you have one class of material that's recycled at about an 80% rate that does have the deposit, and then another that's recycled at about a 20% rate that doesn't. And so what you end up having is a number of the water and Gatorade bottles that end up in the parks and all over the place. But it's good to see that there are efforts out there. I know that we had brought up before recycling in the schools and putting together a grant application. I just had received in my office notification from the DEP that there was a successful application made. Perhaps, Gunther, you could speak to what the plan is for that
Thank you.
grant award.
Yes, the letter that you have before you also came to my office under the Sustainable Materials Grant at Mass DEP. There are a variety of menu choices, and based on the council's recommendation during the summer, we did apply under two categories. One of them would be a larger dollar amount that would have focused outreach coordinator in the schools. That unfortunately was not granted for a couple of reasons. Competition for the big dollar grants, and we're in the middle of a mandatory recycling enforcement grant, and DEP thought it wasn't fair that we would be running on two large grants where some communities wouldn't get any. But the letter you have does indicate that we received $2,000 from Mass DEP. I'll put a cover letter on that, and we'll come before you to accept that from the state, and we'll use that for outreach. And there are some things that are automatically included as reimbursement, and there's some things that we could write in and say, would it be included if we do public space recycling? So we can acquire the appropriate outdoor rated bins for some of our public areas.
Thank you. Lastly, I suppose, because it was mentioned, Councilor Lurie mentioned trying to maybe help some of the smaller, whether it be home businesses or smaller local businesses out in providing that service. Commercial enterprises have been talked about in previous meetings, how we perhaps not extend the service in the same way that we do to residents, but how we make it more economically feasible for them to recycle materials. We had talked about earlier looking at a tiered fee structure in the requirement for waste haulers operating within the city to operate under that fee structure, in which essentially you would have a much higher one for waste hauling, but for the recyclable material you would basically charge at a much lower rate, at a percentage of that particular rate. And so I would encourage the administration to look into how we might incorporate that into, whether it be by ordinance or through the next negotiations for the next contract.
Mr. Mayor, the waste haulers are regulated by the Board of Health, and I have been to some of their meetings, and they do currently have in their regulations that in order for a waste hauler to be approved to do business in the city, they must also supply recycling collection. The manager and I have spoken. It's also possible that in the next contract that the waste hauler, whatever company it might be, could have preferential pricing for Lowell. In that way, it would also give kind of that, preference and tier 2 pricing to companies to jump in and participate in recycling.
Right. I think I suppose the change that might be proposed then to the Board of Health is not just that you have waste haulers required to provide that service, but they provide it at just a fraction of what they provide for the normal waste hauling, so that you have that financial incentive and also financial capability on the part of the businesses themselves to be able to recycle more material and utilize those services.
Sure, I can work with the manager's office to bring a memo forth to the Board of Health to consider that on their next agenda.
Right, we can work on that and seeing how that would be set up and implemented.
Sure. Yep. Council Leahy?
Thank you. I just want to caution us, when we're talking about the different tier barrels, it kind of reminds me of like when you go out to eat. I mean, if you go out with a group of people, you're either in or you're out. So we get too bogged down with worrying about 3 different barrel sizes and all that. I mean, I kind of feel like just because I have 3 kids and 5 people in a house, I shouldn't be paying, the most either. It's a bulk rate and it's a benefit to the city, a benefit for me for being here that you take my trash out, and I appreciate that. But, we don't want people feeling like, well, I should have the option to go down, but I shouldn't be paying, feeling like I'm being penalized just because I do it. I mean, we've always had 1 barrel and 3 recycling bins, but, it does come in handy when you have that extra week when you fill it up to the top, so.
It's essentially, it would be a modified pay-as-you-throw, and that's what, we use Worcester as the example for, the amount of recycling they do. They have a strict pay-as-you-go system, pay-as-you-throw, so that you put out 1 bag, it costs a certain amount. You put out 10 bags, it costs 10 times that to put out. But it is that type of system would be sort of a modified that wouldn't be quite as draconian, perhaps, to the citizens.
Council, a comment that I was just talking to the advisory committee. We have to keep in mind that 2/3 of the collection cost is getting the truck to the house, regardless of the size of the cart. So only 1/3 of the cost represents how much you add into it. So that would also be incorporated in the pricing, is that it's per stop that we pay our hauler for.
Thank you. And I would just add that as far as the commercial rates, it's also to try and get those multifamilies that don't qualify and the condominium buildings that don't currently qualify to receive these services, to be able to hopefully access more affordable services in the future. But at this point, I'd open it up for anyone that wishes to speak or ask any questions to the committee. Mr. Green, if you could.
I'm Stephen Green. I reside at 181 Market Street, and I'm the chairman of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. And I had the opportunity to serve with fellow members, David Grenier, and he may come up and make a quick remark, and Lou Richards, who was a neighborhood representative. And one thing I wanted to say is that our intent is to tidy up some of the problems that we've seen with some of the existing ordinance. So you'll see that there's some things that, gee, why don't you do this differently? Well, we were trying to avoid some problems that had cropped up. When you realize that you have a lot of missing containers or stolen containers or containers that are being used in the wrong locations, and the city is paying literally for the cost of that disposal, and the person who's getting the advantage of it isn't. We're also trying to make sure we're encouraging recycling. And we recognize that recycling is a significant benefit. The more that we can recycle, the greater we can reduce the cost of our tipping fees. And the tipping fees represent roughly about $100 a ton for every ton. Every ton we can take out, and as we improve, and maybe we don't get that improvement with a single stream waste stream, but we get a higher volume. Mayor Murphy is absolutely right. There are issues with single stream on the cleanliness issues associated with it. But if we can divert more material into recycling or composting, which is on the yard waste side, we will save the city a lot of money. We've made, and you think about it, when we started at this with creating the CART program, we've made enormous progress. And now the next level is to look, let's get those overfilled carts that have a lot of recyclables in them. And even if we just made some enforcement, and that's another thing that we're really pushing there, that there isn't a level of enforcement. No one likes to get tickets, no one likes to be told they're not doing it right. But I look to the connector as an example of where speed was a killing factor for years. And it took a couple of serious actions, but we took action, and now the speed limit is a reasonable 55 most of the time. So we'll work with you to come up with those adjustments and other changes. There are lots of interesting concepts that could come up with a new waste contract. One of the things that if we need to be thinking long-term in the sense that if we go to smaller containers, we should make the investment to have RFID tags in them so they're very quick and easy to track. And that way, when the truck pulls up, it knows exactly which container it's picking up from. And that can all be computer monitored, handled electronically, and relatively little level of effort. So I'll stop saying, I'll just offer the opportunity to my fellow members just to say a few words, but I want to leave you with one thought. In the United States, we throw out every year about $1 billion worth of usable resources. Okay? And to do that, we spend, sorry, not 1 billion, 11 billion. To do that, we spend 12 billion to throw it out. So it's like taking a dollar bill and paying someone $1.10 to burn it for you. So, and David's been our school representative.
My name is David Grenier, 43 Walnut Street in Lowell, and I teach at the Robinson School. Over the years, I've taught at the Robinson and the Rogers School, which respectively in their times have been the biggest middle schools in the city, student population-wise. One of the things that we looked at last year was the dumpster space that the schools were using. And we saw that the Robinson, with 660 students, had less dumpster space than schools with far, far fewer students, schools with half the populations. So some schools are forced to find things to do with their waste, forced to recycle, and they do it. I know that there are obstacles in a school building to recycling effectively. Some of it has to do with buy-in by staff and custodians and by kids. But what we've seen at the Robinson, at the Rogers, is that those things are certainly surmountable. And the schools are obviously a good point of education, not just for the kids, but for the parents. I mean, I have had, as coordinator for recycling in the schools where I've taught, I've definitely had kids come to me, ask me how they get a bin for their house, and talk to me about the things that are happening at home. So I do think the schools are a good opportunity for us, and I see that there are more things happening in the schools. Superintendent Franco is really receptive. She's invited us to speak at principals' meetings on a couple of occasions, and we've gotten feedback from principals. And Marty Cohen, who's the director of social studies and science for the district, I don't know if it's just 5 through 9 or, but anyway, she's at central office. She's started a district-wide committee to try to promote recycling. So there is a lot that we're doing there. But making it a requirement for schools and other municipal buildings to do it, I think, will put schools in a position where they have to and they can. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
My name's Lucille Richards. I live at 114 Billing Street in Lowell. Being a neighborhood activist, I have seen an improvement in recycling in the neighborhoods, but I do believe in education and also the enforcement. And the more we're out there and reaching out to people in the neighborhoods, I think people will definitely increase their efforts in recycling for good. So that's the way I would see it. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you all for having worked on the proposed changes. I suppose on that last point of education and what Councilor Lurie had mentioned earlier as far as commercial waste producers, what plans might be put in place to conduct kinds of waste management audits where some of the largest commercial users could actually, have an audit completed by the city or some kind of a third party to be able to make recommendations so that it's not all, sort of penalties, but it's actually trying to encourage and work with the businesses to reduce both their waste and their costs. And to have then also targeted audits for those small businesses like that might benefit from that, like the Best Retail Practices Program, to be able to go in and actually reduce some of the costs on the margins so that they are better able to succeed.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. You brought up a point, and you joined us at the Green Restaurant opening through DPD and the Chamber. We have a Green Restaurant program. It's in its formative years and its pilot years. We focused on a small subset of businesses that can go green within their points, sort of like a LEED certification. They can do recycling and food waste composting. As soon as the Green Restaurant program is up and running, we do plan to expand it to a green business program, and then they will get audits as part of their solid waste and recycling. So we're crawling, and then we can walk, and then we can run.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for the work that you've done on this. Councilor Lurie?
I'd like to make a motion to refer the language to the Law Department for approval, or to be looked at and...
Back to the administration, sure.
Sure.
Motion by Councilor Lurie,
Seconded.
by Councilor Newton. Roll call, please.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Norton.
Yes.
3 yeas.
Thank you. At this point, I think that concludes what's actually on the agenda.
I wanted to thank the council for the opportunity. I know that just about 4 years ago this month, the advisory committee came before this group to enact the automated collection, and I know at the time there were some councilors who were hesitant. It wasn't a 9-0 vote, and I remember the comment succinctly was, this is a test. We're going to see how we do, and we're going to improve it. We're going to make changes so that we can manage it curbside, and that's why we've come before you again to make improvements, and the manager alluded it might be a programmatic change to really affect a change in recycling. Thank you again.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, are there any further comments? Councilor Leahy?
Thank you. So we really didn't get any paperwork, right, to see what the changes are?
Yeah, this was in the packet maybe about a month and a half ago.
Oh, all right. Okay. I'm used to on the school side, we always get paperwork the night of, so
We'll be,
I apologize.
right, well, this was sent on, it was referred to the environmental subcommittee. We'll work on the language and put this, and then we'll bring it back to the council for a vote.
Okay. I just want to emphasize again, I think, the schools especially, if there's some way we could recycle I appreciate the efforts that they're doing on the schools, but you can't expect the two guys at night to collect, 100 bins in the school and put it out. It's just impossible. So we could definitely recycle a ton of garbage from our schools. And, the cans from the kitchens could be cleaned out, all the paper, the plastic bottles and stuff. But we gotta figure out a way to get it out there, easily, so we're not burdening the schools every week.
Mr. Grenier?
My experience, thank you. My experience at the Robinson, the Rogers, and from my communication with teachers at other schools is that recycling programs, none of the recycling programs that I know of in the district are really managed by custodial staff. At the Robinson, it's run by a group of teacher volunteers and some students, and I think that's the way it often is. As far as recycling of cafeteria waste, I've communicated with our cafeteria director at the Robinson. She's given me specific requests, like, we can do this, but it's more than we can fit into our time to break these other objects down. So, teachers are doing a lot of the work, and there's also opportunity to communicate with cafeteria staff and find out what's feasible, or ask how we can achieve certain things that we want to achieve.
Right. I mean, I know that they want can crushers, so they
Yeah.
crush all the cans.
That's
They want
that's
separate
specifically
cans.
what our cafeteria director said. It's not practical for us. Maybe there's a way to take another look at that and see if there's a way to take it out of the cafeteria staff's hands. But anyway, those things are being
Again, it's
explored
all
in different schools.
manpower,
Yeah,
but there's a lot of potential there that we're not
absolutely, absolutely.
reaching our potential. Okay. So that stuff will be in this report too then, or no?
That won't be in the report.
doing
This
the-
is just working on the ordinance, but that's something that we're going to continue to work on with the school department to
All right. I
increase
mean,
that
maybe
level of
we could
recycling.
talk to you, Lowell, and see what, over the years, how they're, I would imagine they're saving money on their dumpster for garbage, and what the difference is between their recycling dumpsters and their garbage dumpsters, and maybe there's something there that would benefit the city.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
Motion to adjourn?
It's a motion to adjourn by Council Laurie.
Second.
Seconded by Council Noon. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
We gotta go outside and see what time it is. Clock's working again.